Breaking. King Charles has been left shattered. Just 1 hour ago, inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, the king was handed a letter written by Queen Camilla herself, one she never meant for him to see. What followed was unthinkable of silence and then tears. Sources close to the palace say the betrayal goes deeper than anyone imagined. Camilla didn't just keep secrets, she hid an entire chapter of the past from him. Charles whispered just 5 words. "I don't know her anymore." The monarchy has survived scandal before, but never one this personal. The locked room that changed everything. It began on a cold October morning in 2025 when Thomas Radley, a loyal servant of 17 years, received an unusual message. It came not from the palace, but from Queen Camilla, his personal secretary. The request was simple, or so it seemed. Retrieve a box of all belongings from a country estate once owned by Camilla, his late confidant Lady Evelyn Harrington. The house had been untouched since 2018 when Lady Evelyn passed. Few even knew it still belonged to the royal family. The house was in Northumberland, tucked behind dense hedges and wrought iron gates. The air was crisp and the windows dust-covered. As Thomas stepped inside, just past 9:30 am, he immediately felt it, a stillness, like the place had been waiting for someone. The furniture was draped in white cloths. The clocks had all stopped in the hallway. A faded portrait of Lady Evelyn smiled down, ageless and unknowable. Thomas moved carefully, following Camilla, his list first floor study storage closet. But she'd left out something crucial. At the top of the grand staircase, a door caught his eye. Unlike the others, it was sealed. The brass plate read "Storage, do not enter" in bold lettering. The handle didn't turn beneath it. A second lock rusted secure. But it wasn't just the luck that disturbed Thomas. It was what Camilla had said earlier that week with oddly urgent eyes. "Whatever you do, leave the locked room alone." She hadn't explained. She hadn't needed to. Her tone said enough. Thomas didn't mean to disobey, but something pulled at him, a whisper from the past, or perhaps his own curiosity. In the study behind a false drawer, he discovered an old ring of keys. One bore the initials EH etched in silver. It fit the second lock perfectly. The door opened with a creak that seemed to shiver down the hall. The air inside was cold. The room hadn't been touched in over a decade, and what it held would change everything. Thomas stood at the threshold, heart racing. Behind him, silence. Before him, shadows. The room wasn't large, but it was 4 boxes stacked like puzzle pieces, thick with dust, a cracked mirror, a wardrobe sealed with twine, and on the floor a bundle of old letters, their edges yellowed, their ink faded. He stepped in slowly. Each letter bore the same name, Camilla. But these weren't just friendly notes. These were confessions written not to others, but to herself. Camilla's secret letters. There were 3 boxes, each marked only with the letter seen in faint pen inside. Dozens of envelopes, all addressed in Camilla, his own handwriting. Some were sealed, others were loosely folded. The dates spanned from 1993 to 2020. One began, "To the woman I once was." Another, "To the truth I've spent decades hiding." These weren't love letters or journal entries. These were admissions, private monologues of guilt, grief, and regret that had never been meant for eyes, not even her own again. Thomas opened one dated March 14, 1997, just 5 months before Diana's death. Camilla, his words trembled on the page. "I still see her in my sleep. I still hear her voice in the corridor. I cannot keep pretending this never happened." Another, written in 2004, read, "If the crown ever comes, it will weigh heavier than they can imagine. Not because of duty, but because of what I carry." Thomas' hands shook as he turned the fragile paper over. A single line was scribbled in red. "I buried more than memories in that house." The letters grew darker with time. One from 2011, the year William married Catherine, confessed, "I watched him marry her with tears in my eyes, not for jealousy, but because I know what this family asks women to give up. I've seen it. I've caused it." The more Thomas read, the more a painful story unfolded, not of Camilla and Charles, but of Camilla and herself. These letters weren't written to her late friend Evelyn. They were written to someone else, someone she could never face, to herself. Camilla had carried a truth, or many truths, for over 30 years, and she had hidden them here in the one place no one would look until now. And with each opened envelope, Thomas could feel the storm building. These weren't just personal reflections, they were royal landmines. If even one were released to the public, it wouldn't just damage her legacy, it could fracture the monarchy. And as Thomas reached for the last box on the shelf, he noticed something even more damning. Unlike the others, this box wasn't dusty. It looked newer, packed with care, 5 letters inside, all sealed, all addressed to the same man, King Charles. But the dates ranged from years before he was king: 1999, 2006, 2017, 2022, and one marked simply for after. These were never delivered, never meant to be. And yet here they were, wrapped in twine, left behind. Thomas knew what he held could break hearts or set them free. "I love" that demanded silence. Before opening the 5th letter, Thomas paused. A painting caught his eye, half covered by a blanket in the corner of the room. He pulled the cloth back slowly. It was a portrait. Camilla, smiling, youthful, seated in a garden. Beside her, Lady Evelyn Harrington, glowing with ease. But there was a third figure, barely visible in the background, hidden in shadows, almost painted over. And yet, unmistakable, the iconic eyes, the delicate frame, Princess Diana. Why was she there, and why obscured? It didn't make sense, unless it wasn't a painting of friendship. It was a portrait of entanglement, of a story no one had told. Thomas stepped closer and noticed a single brush stroke around Diana's figure. Deliberate, faint and shimmering, almost ghost-like. It felt like a warning. He turned back to the letters, one in particular dated July 2005, weeks after Camilla, his marriage to Charles, spoke directly to the guilt. "I stood beside you, Charles, wearing white and smiling. But inside I mourned what I had erased, not her, but what she knew, what we all knew." Another letter whispered of something unspoken, sacred and forbidden. There were no names, but Thomas understood this wasn't just about Camilla and Evelyn. Diana had been part of it, on not in rivalry, but in something else entirely. And suddenly the shame, the secrecy, the sorrow, all made sense. The guilt Camilla had buried wasn't only personal, it wasn't just about reputation or marriage. It was about Diana, about a promise, a silence, a bond that defied categories. The truth had not been erased, just hidden in a locked room inside a painting, between the lines of letters never meant to be read. The box labeled Charles. The last box set heavier than it looked, tied neatly with dark ribbon, its corners barely worn. On the top, a single word written in Camilla's unmistakable script: Charles. Inside were 5 sealed envelopes, each marked with the day. The earliest was March 1999, shortly after Diana's tragic passing. Another, from April 2006, 1 year into Camilla's official role as Duchess. The most recent bore only a chilling phrase: "For after everything." Thomas sat in silence for nearly the hour, unable to open them. These were not meant for royal eyes, not even his own, but curiosity nodded him. Finally, he unsealed the letter dated June 2017, the year of Harry and Meghan's engagement. His words spilled out in sharp tremble. The lines: "I chose silence because I thought it was protection. But silence doesn't save anyone, it only delays destruction." She spoke of secrets within the marriage, of truths she feared would collapse the crown. Each letter grew more intense. The 2022 note, written just before Charles became king, was filled with dread. "He trusts me with everything but this, and I trust no one enough to say it." There was no mention of names, but Camilla's shame was thick. She wrote of being haunted by what we did and warned of the truth too heavy for the throne. Thomas realized the depth of what he had uncovered: not gossip, not scandal, but something that threatened the very foundation of the monarchy. One letter ended with a line that echoed in Thomas' ears: "If you're reading this, it means I never had the courage to tell you myself." Thomas clutched the envelope. It wasn't his to hold, but now that he had, there was no turning back. He tucked the unopened letter into his coat, heart pounding. Whatever was inside had been written for Charles, and Charles alone. The ride back to Buckingham Palace was silent. Thomas kept the letter hidden in his inside pocket. By 7:10 p.m., he was inside the private quarters. He didn't ask permission, he simply requested an audience. King Charles, now in his royal study, looked up confused as Thomas entered. The and below passed between them without explanation. No words, just paper and the weight of a buried past. Charles opened it, and as his eyes scanned the first lines, everything stopped. Truth delivered. Charles read the letter in silence. Not once did he look up. His fingers gripped the paper tightly, knuckles white. By the second paragraph his breathing changed, his lips parted slightly, a tremor passed through his hand. Then at 7:26 p.m. he stopped reading altogether. His eyes welled up. He dropped the letter onto the desk and covered his face. A moment passed, and then the unthinkable. The King Charles III began to cry. Thomas stood frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay. The man before him wasn't monarch or leader. He was a husband betrayed, a father blindsided, a man unraveling. Charles, his voice cracked as he whispered, she knew everything. There were no guards, no secretaries, only the sound of quiet weeping in a room lined with portraits of kings past, none of whom had ever faced a truth like this. He turned toward Thomas, his eyes read. Take me there. That was all he said. No explanation, no command, just a need. The country house, the locked room, whatever Camilla had hidden there, Charles needed to face it. He stood up, rushing past his aides still in uniform from earlier meetings. Thomas nodded. By 8 p.m. they were in a black car headed north. No escort, no royal convoy, just two men and the long road to reckoning. And as the rain began to fall over the Yorkshire countryside, a different storm was building inside the king. The kind that didn't pass, the kind that rewrote legacies. He stared out the window in silence, clutching the letters still folded in his palm. Whatever waited behind that locked door, it was no longer a secret. It was a reckoning, and Camilla, whether ready or not, was about to face it. The car pulled into the Est at 10:19 p.m. Lights were already on. Someone had arrived before them. Charles stepped out, walking briskly toward the house. And then, on the stairs she appeared, Camilla, dressed in black hair, wind-blown eyes wide with fear. She hadn't been summoned, she just knew. The moment Charles saw her, his steps slowed, her voice cracked as she whispered, "You weren't supposed to find it." But it was too late. Camilla, his last stand at the staircase. The grand staircase had never felt so steep. Camilla stood midway, gripping the banister, blocking Charles' path. "Please," she said, her voice barely louder than the storm outside. "Some things are better left buried." She was shaking, not from the cold, but from panic. Charles didn't raise his voice. He simply looked up and asked, "Better for you or better for the truth?" The silence between them stretched for 12 long seconds. She descended one step, trying to explain. "I wasn't protecting myself, I was protecting us, the family." But her words landed hollow. Charles, his face was unreadable. His heart had broken back at the palace. Now he was past fury. He was in mourning. "You made that decision without me," he said. "You chose silence, and now I choose truth." Camilla reached out to stop him. He stepped past her, climbing the stairs. Camilla followed, desperate now. "I loved her, Charles, in my own way. You don't understand what she asked of me." But he did not look back. Each footstep was louder than the last upstairs. The locked doors still stood open from when Thomas had first broken the seal. The air was cold, thick with memory. Charles paused at the threshold, staring into the shadows of his wife's hidden past. He stepped inside. What waited beyond was not rage, but revelation. And as Camilla stood at the top of the stairs, trembling, the words she had feared most echoed back toward her. She must never know. That sentence, scrawled behind a frame tucked behind a painting, was about to unravel the final secret, a truth that no crown could contain. The photograph behind the portrait. The room was colder now, as if it had held its breath for 30 years. Charles steps toward the painting, the same one Thomas had uncovered days earlier, the portrait of Camilla, Lady Evelyn, and the faded third figure, Diana. But it wasn't the painting that pulled him closer. It was the slight tilt of the frame, the looseness of the hook. Behind it, a narrow slit in the wall, a hiding place. Charles reached in his fingers, touched something smooth wrapped in wax paper. He pulled it free. It was a photograph, aged but protected. A little girl, no more than 4 years old, stared up at him. Blue eyes, dark curls. Diana's face unmistakably echoed in the child. A small note was tucked behind it in handwriting he recognized instantly. "Camilla," is it read. "Keep her safe. She must never know. Charles stumbled backward, sitting down hard on the edge of the chair. "Who is she?" he whispered. Camilla stood frozen in the doorway, face pale, his linen, her lips parted. But no sound came. He turned the photo around on the back. August 1985. Her name is Anna. Diana is his daughter. The walls felt like they were closing in. Everything Charles had ever known about his marriage, his past, Diana, had just shattered in his hands. Camilla finally spoke, barely. She was born before the engagement. Diana was barely 19. No one knew, not the palace, not even Charles, only Evelyn and I. Her voice broke. She begged us to keep her secret. She gave the baby up, and we helped her do it. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was clarity. The secret wasn't just personal, it was royal blood lost to time, and Charles now held the proof. Camilla collapsed into the chair across from him. Her eyes were empty. No more explanations, just the slow unraveling of the truth, too heavy to carry alone. Charles stared at the photo, the child's face glowing beneath decades of dust. "She's real," he whispered. Diana's daughter. His mind raced. 1985, just months before their wedding. How could this have been hidden? The answers were coming, but they would lead to more than closure. They would change everything. Diana's last secret. Camilla took a shaky breath, wiping her face with trembling hands. "It was May 1985, she said. Diana showed up at Evelyn the State with a suitcase and a tear-stained letter. She was terrified, alone. She said she couldn't tell Charles, couldn't tell the palace, so Evelyn and we arranged everything." Charles listened without blinking. Each word chipped away at the reality he thought he lived in. Diana, only 23 at the time, had carried this alone. Camilla continued, voice steadier. "Now she gave birth in secret, a private clinic in Devon. No birth certificate under her name. Just a midwife paid in cash. No records, no questions. The girl, Anna, was placed with a discreet adoption agency overseas." Diana returned to London 3 weeks later, radiant in public, broken in private. "She never spoke of it again," Camilla whispered. "But it never left her. You could see it in her eyes every time she looked at children." Charles closed his eyes. The image of Diana, bright, young, fragile, now layered with a grief he'd never understood. The postpartum sadness, the mood swings, the occasional distance. It had all made sense now in hindsight, and he hadn't seen it. No one had. "She carried that pain to her grave," Charles said. "And you carried it with her." Camilla nodded, her voice crumbling. "And I thought burying it was loyalty, but now it feels like betrayal." The photograph sat between them, a symbol of everything they had hidden, everything they had lost. A daughter now grown somewhere out there, unaware, unknowing, a royal bloodline erased. And for what? Reputation, protection. Camilla about her head. "I thought I was doing what she asked, but maybe I was only protecting myself." Charles didn't respond, not yet. He was too busy grieving a life never lived, and a daughter never known. The sun was rising over the countryside. The locked room had revealed its final secret, but the consequences had only just begun. Charles stood, the photograph still in hand. Camilla sat motionless. No orders were given, no decisions made, but both knew the monarchy would never be the same. Diana's secret was now Charles's burden, and the question burned behind his silence: would he find the child or leave her last forever? A king's grief. Back at Buckingham Palace, Charles locked the door behind him and sat alone in his private study. The photograph was on the desk. A small candle burned beside it, the same kind Diana loved during her quiet evenings. His thoughts were chaos, but his grief was clear. He whispered her name, Diana. "Why didn't you tell me?" There was no answer, only the flicker of flame and the weight of 20 years too late. Camilla entered hours later, uninvited. She carried a small folder. Inside were dozens of letters, old, stained, worn at the edges. She placed them on his desk. "I wrote to you," she said, "so many times, but I never sent them." One was dated September 1997, the week after Diana's funeral. Another, Christmas 2012, spoke of the unbearable guilt of watching Charles with his grandchildren while hiding her own secrets. Each letter painted the same story. A woman trapped between silence and survival. "I thought telling you would ruin everything," she said, "but maybe not telling you ruined more." Charles flipped through the pages in silence. Her handwriting had aged with time, but the sorrow remained constant. "I wasn't just protecting you," she added softly. "I was protecting my part in it. My shame." Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold her. He only asked one question. "If she's alive, do you want to meet her?" Camilla hesitated, tears welling. "No," she whispered. "But you should." She turned to leave, pausing only once. All of this doesn't have to be public, but it can't be forgotten." Charles sat with that truth. It didn't need a headline, but it deserved remembrance. For Diana, for Anne, for the silence that had lived too long. 2 weeks later, a sealed envelope arrived at the Royal Archives. Inside the letters, the photograph, and a handwritten note from Charles himself. It read to be opened only upon written consent from the monarch, or when truth outweighs tradition. The secrets were buried again, not destroyed or delayed. Charles resumed his duties. Camilla returned to quiet life. But one man did not forget, and that man's was about to walk away. Resignation. Forgiveness. Thomas handed in his resignation on December 1, 2025, precisely 3 weeks after opening the locked room. The palace accepted it without question. No statement was released, no explanation offered. He simply disappeared from the public eye. A loyal servant turned silent witness. He had carried a crown's worth of secrets. Now he would carry none, only the memory of a photograph of face he would never forget. Charles and Camilla left the country estate together on December 3rd, their silence seeing more than words ever could. Their public appearances resumed royal,